morning mist, and soiled water. It is early morning in a soot-covered Victorian street. The sun has not yet risen beyond the smoky chimneys. A quiet gray mist curls between rows of tightly built terraced houses, clinging to the air like an old memory. The fog smells faintly of coal and something sour. Yesterday's filth still clinging to the cobbles and the wooden drains beneath. Before you even open your eyes fully, the distant sound of a milk cart rattling over uneven stone reminds you. It's another day in the 1860s. You lie on a stiff mattress, stuffed with horsehair, wrapped in a sheet that hasn't seen boiling water in weeks. The water, well, that's a problem in itself. You rise slowly. The air in your room is cold and damp. There's no tap in your home. No bathroom. No sink. In the corner sits a cracked ceramic pitcher filled the night before. It was brought from the public pump 4 streets over. Its surface has grown cloudy overnight. In it, flakes of soot have settled like silent intruders. This is your water. For washing your face, brushing your teeth, and maybe, if it lasts, your hands. You cup a bit in your hands. It's freezing, and the first splash on your cheeks bites like pins. Still, it's better than nothing. Soap, if you're lucky enough to have it, is a gray sliver, slightly slimy, scented faintly of animal fat. It's the cheapest kind, and it lingers on your fingers no matter how long you rinse. Outside, other homes are waking. You hear a child cough through the wall. A floorboard creaks upstairs. A mother yells at her boy to fetch more water before the queue at the pump gets long. And it always gets long. Fetching water is a chore that defines your mornings. With a tin bucket in hand, you leave the house, wrap a scarf against the sharp breeze, and head toward the pump. It's set in a square of packed mud, lined with boot prints and wheel tracks. A woman's already there, furiously turning the iron handle. Her bucket is chipped. Yours is smaller. She gives you a look that says, "Wait your turn." You do. You always do. As the pump clanks, brownish water gurgles out. It splashes into the pail with the faint scent of rust and river weed. There's no real guarantee it's clean. Cholera has swept through these streets more than once, carried by water like this. But it's what you have. It's what everyone has. When your turn comes, you fill your bucket and begin the walk back, careful not to spill. Spilled water means another trip. Back home, your mother is boiling a kettle over the coal stove. The kitchen smells of ash and stale bread. The small pot of boiling water will be shared between 5 people. Just enough for a warm cloth rub, what many call a half bath, on face, armpits, and behind the ears. A full bath? That's for the very rich. Or maybe for the weekly visit to a public bathhouse, if you have a penny to spare. And most weeks, you don't. The chamber pot and the midnight walk. Evening descends early on your cramped street, cloaking the alleyways in long shadows and lamplight smoke. The oil lamps cast a dim yellow hue on the cobblestones, but most homes rely on candlelight, or nothing at all. In your single-room home, the fire is low. Its warmth, fleeting. You've already used the good coal earlier in the day. What remains burns weakly and smells of damp. The day is ending, but certain chores remain. And among them, one involves an object you've learned never to ignore, the chamber pot. Tucked under your bed or in a corner by the stove, it sits like a quiet necessity. Some are ceramic, others tin. Yours is metal, cool to the touch, and echoes faintly if moved at night. Its contents are what they are. Waste from the day, collected in silence, then carefully poured out early in the morning or, if the smell becomes too sharp, in the dead of night. There is no indoor plumbing, no flushing toilets, just this pot. And, when full, a walk. You cover the pot with a cloth and prepare. Down the narrow stairs, careful not to trip in the dark, you push open the back door. Outside, the air is sharp and the smell of night is worse. Coal soot, horse dung, rotting food, and other people's waste. All of it hanging thick. Every home in your row empties their pots the same way. Out back, into the shared night soil pit, or, if you're careless or too tired, just into the gutter where rain might eventually wash it down to the Thames. But not tonight. Tonight, you're careful. You hold the pot firmly, stepping over scattered refuse, cabbage leaves, ashes, broken crates, and reach the designated spot near the privy. It's little more than a hole with a rotting wooden cover. The stench is unbearable in summer. In winter, it freezes slightly but never enough. You pour slowly. The sound is muffled by the dirt, but the splash echoes inside your head. A rat scurries away nearby. You pretend not to see it. Then you return inside, and the pot, rinsed with the same cold water you used to wash, is placed back in its corner. It'll be needed again before sunrise. The great unwashed, bathing in Victorian England. Bathing, in the time of Queen Victoria, was more dream than routine. For many, especially the working class, it was an event, rare, awkward, and done with purpose rather than pleasure. Your home, like nearly every other on the block, has no running water. No tap, no bath, no hot stream at the twist of a handle. Instead, there is the copper kettle, the tin washtub, and the labor of patience. Once a week, if the weather is bearable and fuel is sufficient, bathing day comes. Usually Sunday, before church, or after the week's work has dirted every inch of you. You begin with the fire. Coal or wood, anything that will burn, is fed into the stove or hearth. A kettle sits atop it, heating slowly. Water is fetched, bucket after bucket from the neighborhood pump or delivered by the water seller. Heavy, sloshing, cold. It takes time. It takes effort. The tin bath is pulled from behind the door or from the yard. It's wide enough to sit in, but not lie down. The bottom is uneven, the sides dented. It smells faintly of last week's soap. If you're lucky, there's lavender or pine scent. If not, lie in boiled cloth. As the water warms, it is poured in carefully, steaming, shallow, and precious. Every drop matters. You test it with your hand. Still cool. You wait. The fire eats more coal. Finally, it is ready. You undress behind a curtain or corner, aware of eyes in small quarters. Privacy is a privilege not all enjoy. You step in cautiously. The heat rises through your bones. It stings, then soothes. You begin with a cloth. Soap, often homemade or coarse, is lathered between palms. Your skin, tough from the week, reacts slowly. The water darkens as dirt lifts, then settles. You scrub feet, arms, neck. Hair, if washed, is a task all its own. Soap rarely meant for scalps. Bath time is short. The water cools. You rinse with a ladle or cup. The steam fades. You're clean, by the standards of the day. But the water is not discarded yet. It will serve again, for the next person, perhaps. Often the children bathe in the same water, or a spouse enters after you. The water grows murky. Still, it must suffice. Some weeks, there is no bath at all. A cloth wash suffices. Armpits, face, hands, and neck. Top and tail, they call it. It's enough to be seen and not smelled. Laundry, lice, and the battle with filth asterisk. In the rhythm of Victorian life, there was a day many dreaded and many respected. Asterisk Laundry Day star. Not a day of tossing clothes into a machine and pressing a button, but a full-day affair involving boiling pots, scrubbing boards, stiff soap, sore hands, and cold water. In most homes, especially those of the working class, washing clothes was laborious and exhausting. So much so that it was often done only once every 2 or 3 weeks. Monday asterisk was traditionally laundry day, and as the sun rose over sooty chimneys and gray cobblestone streets, smoke would curl from the backyards and alleys. Copper boilers were lit, and water was hauled in, gallon after gallon. If you lived in a town and had access to a tap, you were lucky. But many still relied on water pumps in the street or even rainwater barrels. Soap was not gentle. Made from animal fat and lye, it stung cracked hands and rough skin. Many women, those responsible for washing, wrapped cloth around their fingers to protect them. They used scrubbing boards made of wood and ridged metal. Each shirt, each undergarment, was rubbed up and down with sharp motions, wrung out by hand, then dropped into another bucket for rinsing. There were no fabric softeners. Asterisk. There were no electric irons. Asterisk. Instead, garments were starched and dried in the wind, hung on lines between back doors, or laid out in parks and fields. Children, often barefoot, were tasked with chasing away dogs or birds. Winter brought frozen sheets. Summer brought sweat. Yet laundry was only one part of the fight. There were lice, a near-constant irritation, and often an accepted one. Lice powder was used, but it was toxic and smelled awful. Knit combs were a daily tool. For the poor, who often shared beds and rarely changed linens, lice were as common as fleas on a dog. Washing bedding asterisk was even harder than clothes. Mattresses were filled with straw or horsehair and rarely, if ever, cleaned. Blankets were heavy wool and difficult to dry. Pillows harbored mites. Still, on good days, the sun served as disinfectant, and women would lay mattresses in the garden or on rooftops. Public health officials, beginning in the mid-1800s, began issuing pamphlets about cleanliness. They encouraged regular washing, especially of undergarments. They offered diagrams on how to bathe children or boil rags. The message was growing clear. Filth bred illness. But poverty was stronger than advice. In East End London, a family of 6 might share 2 garments between them. Children ran about half-naked in summer, barefoot, their feet hardened from cobblestones. In mining towns, men came home covered in soot and slept in the same trousers they worked in. Laundresses were professional women who washed other people's clothes. They were tough, usually older, and often had permanent red hands and stooped backs from carrying tubs. They knew stains. They knew tricks with ash, vinegar, and lemon. Some worked out of laundry houses where water was heated in massive copper pots. If you were middle class, you might employ one. If you were upper class, your maids handled your linen. But still, laundry day was serious business. Even Queen Victoria wrote about it. And through all of this, there was pride. Clean linen meant respectability. Stains were shameful. A white collar, even if it was detachable and only changed once a week, was a mark of dignity. The battle with filth wasn't just against dirt. It was a war against judgment, against disease, and against the feeling that life had overwhelmed you. Clean sheets on Sunday gave hope. A crisp shirt for church restored confidence. Fresh socks gave the illusion of control in a grimy world. And so, laundry persisted. Hands scrubbed. Soap lathered. Lines sagged under weight. Clothes fluttered like flags of survival. And the people, worn from work, rested knowing they had won, if only for a moment, the battle against grime. Public baths and the rise of cleanliness campaigns *. In the heart of the Victorian city, where soot blackened every corner and industry never slept, a quiet revolution began. One of water, soap, and hope. Public baths. They were modest buildings. Bricks worn by soot. Modest doorways. Modest promises. But to the laborer who hadn't touched hot water in months, the sight of that building offered something close to relief. Victorian life, especially for the working poor, meant cramped tenements and no indoor plumbing. Many homes had no bath, no sink, no running water. You fetched water from a pump down the street, if it worked. Heated it on a fire, if you had coal. Poured it into a tin tub, if you owned one. Bathing was a chore. Rare. Cold. Inconvenient. And so filth settled. Sweat soaked undergarments. Grime layered onto skin. The scent of labor clung to bodies like fog over the Thames. But reformers, with their pamphlets and charts, began to worry. Could a cleaner body mean a healthier city? They believed it could. Thus, in the early to mid-1800s, the first public baths opened. Funded by philanthropists, churches, or local councils, these places aimed not to pamper, but to purify. For a penny or two, a man or woman could get access to a hot bath, a bar of soap, and, for a brief time, solitude. Separate entrances for men and women, *. Rooms tiled and echoing, *. Attendants with keys, *. You'd hand over your coin, receive a towel, and be led to a numbered door. Inside, a porcelain or tin tub already filled with warm water. The air smelled of coal steam and carbolic soap. For many, it was the only privacy they'd have that week. There were rules. You could not linger. Some baths allowed 20 minutes, no more. Some had strict rotas. You were expected to wash efficiently, no daydreaming in the steam. Still, those moments, however brief, were cherished. And in these same years, cleanliness campaigns began to spread. Leaflets encouraged bathing once a week. Teachers instructed children on washing hands and brushing hair. Churches held sermons on moral purity, using physical cleanliness as metaphor. Cleanliness was now more than habit, it was virtue. Cities painted murals. Public notices were pinned to school walls. Soap manufacturers jumped in, branding their products as saviors from disease. Clean skin, clean soul, some would say. But access remained limited. In industrial slums, where houses leaned into each other and shared yards, washhouses emerged. These were larger buildings with rows of tubs and steam rooms. Entire families came. mothers carrying bundles of clothing, children with pails, fathers silent and grimy from the mill. Inside, the hiss of steam, the thud of wooden clogs, the splashing of buckets. People talked softly. They shared stories, recipes, rumors, while their laundry boiled and their skin soaked. It was not a spa. It was survival. One washhouse might serve hundreds a day. Some women spent hours scrubbing not just clothes, but their babies, their husbands, their neighbors' children. There were no dryers. Clothes were wrung out, hung on rafters, and left to drip. Then there were the public toilets, still new in concept. Before them, people used pails, outhouses, or alleys. The introduction of pay-to-use toilets in cities shocked some. A penny to spend a penny, they joked. But they were cleaner, safer. And so, slowly, cities began to change. Not evenly, not instantly. But by the 1880s and 90s, even in poorer areas, you could find a bathhouse, a public toilet, a drinking fountain. Children sang rhymes about washing hands. Doctors recommended fresh air and clean sheets. It was not yet a world of luxury, but it was a world inching toward dignity. Soap was now scented. Towels were bleached. And though lice still lurked and coughs echoed in cold streets, the belief in cleanliness as power had taken root. Public baths became sanctuaries, not of silence, but of simple human care. A place to feel, if only for 20 minutes, like you were worthy of warmth. Ready to continue with street cleaning, dustmen, and the war on waste? Asterisk. Victorian streets had a sound, not of birds or silence, but of hooves, cartwheels, and the squelch of rot beneath boots. Morning came with mist, and under that haze, cities stirred. Asterisk not with sweeping asterisk, but with stench. The ground was never truly clean. Horse manure, human waste, cabbage leaves, coal dust, dead rats. All mixed into a dense black slurry that stuck to shoes and wagons. In the rain, it thickened. In summer, it baked and reeked. This was the daily battlefield of the dustmen, scavengers, and night soil men, the forgotten laborers of cleanliness. You see, there was no single garbage collection, no plastic bags, no organized waste system for much of the 1800s. Instead, rubbish piled up in yards or street corners until someone paid or begged someone else to take it away. Enter the dustmen, asterisk. These men, often poor themselves, traveled with carts through neighborhoods collecting ash from fires, known as dust, which households piled in corners or bins. This dust was valuable. It could be sold to brickmakers and farmers. So ash was taken, but not everything else. Rotting vegetables, old shoes, dead cats, these were someone else's problem. Then came the rag pickers and mudlarks, often children. They sifted through the filth for scraps of cloth, metal, bones, anything of value. These fragments were sold to merchants who reused them for glue, soap, fertilizer. The recycling economy of desperation. And then, as night fell, the night soil men began their rounds. They worked in silence, hauling away human waste from backyard cesspits. It was dangerous. The pits could collapse. The fumes made men faint. But it paid well, for those willing to do what no one else would. They'd walk narrow alleys, lifting heavy buckets, careful not to spill. They emptied into carts, which rolled out of town before dawn. Some waste went to farms. Some dumped into rivers. All of it gone. Until tomorrow. Street cleaning itself was rare. Asterisk municipalities, when they bothered, hired men with brooms and shovels. Sometimes water carts sprayed the streets to settle the dust. But often, it wasn't enough. Disease lingered in puddles. Rats thrived in alleys. And the poor were blamed, not the broken systems. As cities grew, the filth became impossible to ignore. Newspapers called out the smell. Reformers sketched drawings of gutters overflowing. Doctors linked cholera to dirty streets, even before germ theory was understood. Public pressure mounted. By the 1850s, some cities, asterisk London especially asterisk, experimented with scheduled street cleaning. Sweeping crews formed. Sanitary engineers emerged. New carts, designed to trap smell, replaced old wooden ones. Still, many workers wore no gloves, no masks. Their hands cracked in winter, their boots soaked in muck. They ate lunch beside wagons of waste. But slowly, order formed. Cities drafted waste ordinances. Landlords were fined for blocked drains. Households were told where and when to leave refuse. The term sanitation entered the public vocabulary. Dust yards were built, massive sorting centers where waste was separated by hand. Women in aprons picked through piles with iron hooks, dividing ash from scraps. Rats ran beneath the boards, but the pride of some workers shone through. A good dustman was punctual. A respected sweep left no pile untouched. These were invisible heroes, unsung and unwashed, but essential. In wealthier neighborhoods, street sweepers were hired privately. Gentlemen paid extra to have clean paths. Some shops swept twice a day, not from concern, but to attract customers. Cleanliness became linked to money. By the 1890s, cities saw progress. More workers, more rules, fewer plagues. But still, when fog rolled in and lamps lit the damp streets, the air smelled of horses, coal, cabbage, and something else. That lingering odor of a city still learning to clean itself. And yet, every morning, they swept again. Dirty water, clean myths, the battle for safe drinking asterisk. Tone, calm, visual, immersive, ideal for nighttime listening. In Victorian cities, water flowed, but rarely clean. From a distance, it looked clear. From the pump, it felt cold. But hidden within those drops were dangers people couldn't yet see. Bacteria, parasites, filth. They called it water. We would call it untreated disease. Imagine this asterisk. A woman wakes before dawn. She wraps herself in a shawl, lifts a metal bucket, and walks to the shared pump at the end of the street. The water flows slowly. She waits. Behind her, neighbors line up. Some cough. Some spit. Children play in puddles. The pump handle creaks. The bucket fills. She walks home, unaware that the very water she trusts, she will use for porridge, for tea, for bathing her child, is drawn from an underground pipe just a few feet from a leaking cesspit. In Victorian England, the line between drinking water and sewage was often only a thin layer of soil. Rivers ran thick with waste. The Thames, majestic in painting, stank of decay. Londoners joked, and then worried, that the river bubbled. In some towns, sewage from homes, factories, and slaughterhouses emptied directly into the same rivers used for drinking. But the problem wasn't just infrastructure. It was belief. Doctors debated water's role in disease. Some believed in miasma, the idea that illness came from foul air, not from germs. A bad smell, they thought, was the root of cholera or typhoid. And since water didn't always smell, it couldn't be blamed. But evidence was mounting. People who drank from certain pumps got sick. Those who avoided them did not. Patterns formed, but they were slow to accept. It took a tragedy to make them listen. The Broad Street pump, asterisk. In 1854, cholera swept through Soho in London. Dozens died within days. One man, Dr. John Snow, noticed that victims all lived near the same public pump. He mapped the outbreak. He removed the pump handle. And the deaths stopped. That pump, once trusted, had drawn water contaminated by a leaking cesspit. Snow's act became legend. But in his time, it was controversial. Many still clung to old beliefs. Meanwhile, cities began to act. Slowly, they built covered reservoirs. They laid new pipes. Some filtered water through sand or charcoal. Boiling became common advice. But not everyone followed it. Fuel cost money, and boiling water for large families was no small task. Rural areas were worse. Asterisk. Wells, hand-dug and shallow, often sat beside animal pens. Families drank from ditches. In times of drought, people turned to ponds where animals bathed. Babies were fed with spoons dipped in unclean water. Even in homes of the wealthy, the illusion of cleanliness persisted. Decorative pitchers and porcelain basins filled with water that sparkled and killed. And yet, water meant life. It cooked food, brewed tea, washed wounds, and soothed fever. But it also brought epidemics. In the 1800s, cholera struck London 4 times. Thousands died. Change came, but slowly and unevenly. By the 1870s, municipal water boards were formed. Cities began treating water with chemicals, at first crude, then more refined. Engineers learned to separate clean water from waste. Pipes were buried deeper. Testing began, but people remained cautious. Some households stored water in covered tanks. Others let it sit overnight. Mothers warned children not to drink from public taps. Tea became safer than plain water, boiled and steeped. It killed what the eye could not see. Still, dangers lingered. Floods overwhelmed sewers. Rain mixed with refuse. Pipes cracked. And always, the poor suffered more. Wealthy neighborhoods had better systems. The slums, often forgotten, drank from pumps that stank in summer. And in all this, trust was fragile. A pump that saved one street could kill another. A well cleared today might sour tomorrow. So families listened. To rumors, to neighbors, to instinct. They watched the water. They tasted it carefully. Some prayed. And each day, as a mother poured water into a tin cup, or a child leaned over a public trough, or a worker wiped his brow and reached for a sip, they drank with hope and fear. Victorian bathing rituals and the fear of water asterisk. Water. For the Victorian poor, it was not a daily luxury. It was a question, asterisk when, how, and if asterisk they could afford to use it to bathe. Bathing was not yet routine. For many, it wasn't even weekly. Entire families went days, sometimes weeks, without touching water beyond a damp rag or a splash from a chipped basin. The act of bathing was deliberate, planned, and rarely private. You wake in a cramped tenement. The cold creeps in through the brick. You sit on the edge of a thin mattress. A wooden bucket stands in the corner. Inside it, yesterday's water, still, gray, and reused. This is your bath. You dip a cloth. You wipe under your arms. Behind your neck. You splash your face. The water stings, cold and sour from lye soap. You wince but say nothing. Everyone does the same. Full-body baths were an ordeal, asterisk. For working families, the tin bath came out only on Sundays, if at all. Heated water was expensive. It meant burning coal, which cost money. It meant time. It meant coordination in cramped homes. First the father, then the mother, then the children. All in the same water. If you were youngest, your bath wasn't clean. It was warm with the grime of those before you. Soap, if you had it, was harsh. Made from animal fat and lye, it dried skin and left a sticky film. Perfumed soaps were a luxury of the wealthy. You scrubbed with what you had, or simply wiped and hoped. Fear lingered, too, asterisk. Doctors warned of opening the pores. In cold, damp houses, many believed washing too often, especially with cold water, led to illness. A chill could mean bronchitis. Wet hair? Pneumonia. Even among the wealthy, daily baths were rare. Instead, they relied on dry washing, brushing off skin with cloths, applying powders, or changing undergarments often. A fresh chemise was cleaner than a bath. Women in upper society might bathe once or twice a week, soaking in large porcelain tubs filled by servants. But even they hesitated in winter. Heated water was available, but drafty rooms and marble floors chilled them quickly. Children suffered most, asterisk. In schools, poorhouses, and orphanages, hygiene was inconsistent. Some institutions promoted regular washing, even cold morning dips for discipline. Others ignored it entirely. Dirty nails, lice, and rashes were common. 26/07/1653, ChatGPT. In industrial cities, soot clung to skin. By nightfall, faces were blackened, hands rough, and fingernails dark. But the means to wash it away? Not always present. Bathhouses emerged in the mid-1800s. Built for the poor, they offered public washing spaces, some free, others cheap. Families lined up, carrying towels and buckets. Inside, attendants filled tubs. Soap was rationed. Time was limited. People came not just to clean, but to escape the heat, the damp, the stink of the streets. A bathhouse was a brief step toward dignity. Still, not everyone trusted the water. River water, heated but untreated, filled many tubs. Some left with more infections than they arrived. Eye diseases, skin conditions, even cholera lurked in poorly kept facilities. And so many chose to stay dirty, not by desire, but by fear or lack of choice. Bathing was moralized, too, asterisk. Cleanliness became tied to virtue. Reformers preached that clean people were good people. Dirty ones were lazy. This hurt the poor, who often could not afford to be clean, and now carried shame for it. Soap companies fed this idea. Advertisements showed angels scrubbing boys, mothers beaming beside spotless daughters. They promised purity. They sold hope in a bar. Yet for all the efforts, water remained a struggle. Pipes froze. Pumps dried. Fires failed. Towels grew mildew in cold corners. And baths, when they happened, were quick, cold, and shared. In rural villages, people bathed in streams when weather allowed. In coastal towns, the sea was cleaner than the well. A summer dip might be the only bath for weeks. And always, the question lingered. How clean is enough? Asterisk. In the Victorian mind, dirt was tolerated, even expected. A dusty hem, a coal-smudged hand, a muddy boot, they were signs of life, of labor. Only in sickness or celebration did cleanliness rise to urgency. And so, most days ended not with a hot shower or bubble bath, but with a rag, a bowl, and a quiet resolve to face tomorrow as they were. The hidden dangers of Victorian hair and skincare asterisk. Tone, calm, atmospheric, sleep-friendly. You sit near a small window, brushing your hair. The light is soft, filtered through soot-streaked glass. The brush is wooden, its bristles stiff. Your hair tangles easily. And in 19th century England, that tangling could be the least of your worries. Victorian hair care wasn't gentle. It was ritual, necessity, and often danger in disguise. Oils and powders filled the air, asterisk. Before shampoo, there was combing and oil. Hair was rarely washed with water. Instead, it was brushed daily, sometimes for nearly an hour. The goal was to spread the scalp's natural oils from root to tip, giving the hair shine, taming frizz, and covering any dust from the street. Scented oils were added. Made from lavender, rosemary, or even whale oil, they left a heavy perfume and a sticky residue. Men used pomades made from beef fat or bear grease. The more shine, the more style. But many oils clogged pores. Some caused scalp infections. Others attracted lice. Lice were common. So were remedies that burned. Asterisk. A woman might coat her scalp with vinegar or kerosene to chase the bugs away. A child's hair might be doused with turpentine. These worked, but left burns, bald spots, or worse. The cure, often, was worse than the infestation. Hair was rarely cut. Long locks were valued. And wigs, worn by judges, elites, or on formal occasions, added even more layers. Underneath, the scalp sweated, itched, festered. Now to skincare, if it could be called that. Asterisk. Soap was harsh. Often made with lye and animal fat, it stripped skin raw. There were no moisturizers in the modern sense. Instead, people used tallow, goose fat, or rose water, if they could afford it. Women desired pale skin, almost ghostly, asterisk. A porcelain complexion meant wealth. It meant you stayed indoors, that you weren't a laborer. To achieve it, women applied powders made of lead or arsenic. These smoothed the skin, but poisoned it over time. Lead seeped into the bloodstream. Arsenic caused weakness, nausea, even death. Some tonics promised eternal beauty. They were sold in shops, attractive bottles, floral labels. Inside, mercury, belladonna, ammonia. Women drank them or rubbed them into their faces, unaware that these secret formulas were slowly killing them. Men were not exempt. Asterisk. Barber shops were havens, warm, masculine spaces with scents of leather and bay rum. But razors were shared, and not always cleaned. Cuts led to infections. A simple nick on the chin could become fatal. There were no antibiotics. No antiseptics, only hope. Acne, asterisk. Covered with powder. Scrubbed with rough cloth. Picked with fingers. Scarring was accepted. And since beauty was tied to health, blemishes brought shame. People whispered. Women cried behind closed doors. Wrinkles? Freckles? Birthmarks? Asterisk. Each had its own myth. Freckles meant you'd been lazy in the sun. Birthmarks were omens. Wrinkles meant hard living. Remedies were passed down. Milk baths, cucumber masks, beeswax bombs. But most had little effect. And through it all, the public image remained polished. Painted cheeks. Rouged lips. Slick back hair. The facade held, even as the body beneath it itched, burned, or peeled. There was one comfort. Routine. Asterisk. Each morning and night, the same motions. Brushing, dabbing, powdering, pinning. The ritual soothed, even when the products harmed. The mirror offered reflection, but also escape. A version of the self. Cleaner, calmer, more in control. And for many, that was enough. So as the night falls and the lamp flickers, you set down your brush. Your hair gleams in the dim light, oiled, combed, and pinned. Your cheeks are powdered. You pull your nightgown over dry, stretched skin, and tuck into a cold bed. And tomorrow, it begins again. Public baths, scandals, and the rise of cleanliness campaigns asterisk. Tone, soft, atmospheric, gently immersive for sleep. The streets outside are quiet. Fog rolls between buildings, muffling the sound of horseshoes and distant voices. You step outside with a bundle of towels beneath your arm. It's Saturday, bath day. And for most Victorians, that meant walking to a public bathhouse. Home baths were rare luxuries. Asterisk. Even in middle-class homes, indoor plumbing wasn't common until the late 19th century. Water had to be boiled in pots. Baths, if they happened, were done in portable tubs. Shared. Reused. Cold. For the poor, bathing at home wasn't an option. So cities built public baths, rooms of hot tiles, echoing walls, and sharp scents of lime and steam. But the bathhouses came with rules. Asterisk. Separate entrances for men and women. Time slots. Soap not always included. And privacy? Minimal. Thin curtains, if any. You handed your towel to an attendant, stepped into a cubicle, and bathed while others waited behind. Some people hated the idea. It felt invasive. Shameful. Like admitting you couldn't clean yourself at home. Still, they filled. Asterisk. Because by the 1850s, reformers had linked hygiene to morality. They believed a clean body made for a clean soul. That bathing cured laziness, crime, even poverty. So cleanliness campaigns spread. Posters were plastered on alley walls. Wash daily. Pamphlets warned that filth led to disease, and worse, sin. Teachers inspected children's fingernails in class. Employers sniffed workers' breath. But even in public baths, danger lurked. Asterisk. Water wasn't always changed between users. Tubs went unscrubbed. Warm, wet rooms became homes for lice, rashes, infections. Some bathhouses were clean. Many were not. For women, the experience was different again. Asterisk. In poorer districts, the women's side was smaller. Cramped. Often without hot water. Many women brought their children and washed them first, then themselves. It wasn't relaxing, it was labor. Another chore. And sometimes it was worse. A woman undressing in public, even behind curtains, was vulnerable. There were reports of male attendants peeking, of assaults, of rumors that kept many women away altogether. Meanwhile, in the upper classes, asterisk. Bathtubs appeared, but slowly. Wealthy homes might have them made of tin, zinc, even marble. Water was piped in, but often only cold. A maid would boil kettles and pour them in until it was warm enough. A single bath could take an hour to prepare. Perfumed soaps, soft cloths, towels stitched with initials. It was comfort, but only for a few. The average Victorian bathed weekly, if that, asterisk. And still, society judged. Unwashed hands meant sloth. Greasy hair meant vice. A bad odor could cost you a job or a marriage. So cities doubled down. Public bathhouses became political promises. Newspapers praised the moral uplift of clean neighborhoods. And by the century's end, cleanliness wasn't just hygiene. It was a social weapon. To be clean was to be respectable. Asterisk. To be unwashed? A threat. You return home, skin pink from the bath. Your towel is damp. Your clothes feel scratchy, but dry. You feel strangely calm. A bit cleaner, a bit more whole. And outside, the fog thickens. Another bathhouse closes for the night. Another lamp is extinguished. In the silence of sleep, the water cools and waits for next week. Why Victorians feared body odor so much asterisk. From what Victorian hygiene was really like boring history for sleep asterisk. Tone, calm, slow-paced, and subtly reflective to encourage rest. The scent of coal smoke drifts through open windows. Gas lamps hiss. Somewhere below, a horse-drawn cart rolls past. But inside this narrow townhouse, you're seated before a small mirror, dabbing cologne behind your ears. Not because you're vain, but because, in Victorian society, body odor was terrifying. Yes, asterisk terrifying, asterisk. It wasn't just a matter of politeness. It was moral. It was medical. It was even spiritual. Let's drift back in time and inhale slowly. In the early 1800s, the prevailing belief was miasma theory, that disease traveled in bad smells. Foul air. Decaying things. If you smelled bad, people thought you might spread death. So a foul body was more than offensive. It was dangerous. But there was a problem. Most people couldn't avoid it. Baths were rare. Water was cold or unavailable. Soap was expensive. So instead of bathing, people turned to masking the scent. Enter perfumes, herbs, vinegar washes, asterisk. You might carry a small cloth soaked in lavender, or place rosemary under your arms. Some people wore perfumed sachets beneath their clothes. Vinegar foot soaks were used to neutralize odor and clean the soul. But for the working class, there was little time or money for such rituals. Their bodies, overworked, underwashed, became targets of social shame. Women especially were judged harshly, asterisk. A woman who smelled of sweat was seen as uncivilized, or worse, unchaste. Manuals instructed girls to sprinkle perfume on underclothes. Magazines warned readers not to offend the noses of suitors. There were even commercial ads, asterisk, don't let body odor lose you love, asterisk. Then came innovations, asterisk. In the mid to late 1800s, entrepreneurs began to market deodorizing products. Early antiperspirants used aluminum salts. Some were so harsh they caused burns. Others suggested brushing armpits with baking soda or chalk. Deodorant pads were stitched into corsets. Armpit shields were worn inside, sleeves to catch sweat. The effort to stay dry was exhausting. Because dryness meant dignity, asterisk. Odor, any odor, meant you were slipping. It meant poverty, laziness, even criminality. Even architecture was influenced. Victorian homes emphasized airflow, high ceilings, ventilation grates, drafty halls, all designed to keep smells from lingering, especially bodily ones. In public, odor management was constant. Handkerchiefs were dabbed with cologne. Gloves protected palms from sweat. People powdered their feet, changed collars daily, and always kept distance when speaking. It was the age of the subtle sniff, asterisk. A wrinkled nose could shatter reputations. In boarding schools, children were inspected. In factories, workers were scolded. In churches, sermons hinted at hygiene as holiness. And yet, the great toothbrush problem, why Victorians didn't smile much asterisk. Tone, gentle, slow-paced, designed to calm the listener before sleep. The gaslights flicker. You're sitting near a small cracked mirror, maybe brushing your hair before bed. And yet, there's one thing most Victorians didn't do at night, or in the morning, or really at all. They didn't brush their teeth. Yes, tonight's quiet journey is into the strange, sad world of Victorian dental hygiene, or more accurately, the lack of it. So, why didn't they smile much? Let's gently wander through the forgotten toothbrush drawers of history. In 1850s Britain, toothbrushes existed, but they were expensive. Made with bone or ivory handles and hog-hair bristles, they were mostly for the upper class. A factory worker wouldn't waste half a week's wages on a toothbrush. Many didn't even know they existed. Toothpaste, asterisk rare. If anything, people used salt, charcoal, ashes, or crushed brick, harsh and abrasive. Some swore by soot. Others rubbed their teeth with rags. But most people, they did nothing. Teeth were considered part of nature. Asterisk they came, they went, asterisk. By the age of 30, many had lost most of them. By 40, false teeth were common, even if you were poor. But these weren't modern dentures. They were carved from wood, animal bone, or, if you were wealthy enough, asterisk human teeth asterisk, often sourced from graveyards or battlefield corpses. Yes, really. Napoleon soldiers' teeth were famously sold in bulk. They were called asterisk Waterloo teeth. Asterisk. Dental pain? Common. Toothaches were so routine, people lived with them for months or years. There were no antibiotics, no numbing gels, no proper dentists. Extractions were brutal, done at home, with pliers, or by a barber surgeon. Screaming was expected. So was fainting. No anesthesia, no antiseptic, just whiskey and courage. The worst part? Sugar was everywhere. Asterisk the British Empire ran on sugar, in tea, jam, sweets. Even the working class could afford it. And with no brushing and no understanding of decay, it quietly rotted their mouths from the inside. Smiling in portraits? Rare. Not just because of exposure times, but because people were ashamed. In aristocratic circles, black teeth became so common they were considered normal. Queen Elizabeth I wore thick white makeup and kept her mouth mostly closed. Her teeth were black and decaying. By the Victorian era, things were a little better, but not much. By the late 1800s, tooth powder in tins became popular. Often minty or flowery, it was sold in apothecaries, but it still didn't stop decay. Children rarely had dental checkups. Most school-aged kids had bad breath, loose teeth, or gum infections by adolescence. Mouthwash? Not really. Though some used vinegar or spirits, it often did more harm than good. So what did that mean for daily life? Bad breath asterisk was everywhere. Toothless adults asterisk in their 30s were normal. Dentures asterisk clacked and fell out. And toothaches were a nighttime curse you simply endured. There were even bedtime prayers asking for relief from tooth pain. As the candle dims, imagine trying to sleep with a rotting molar. A low, throbbing ache. No medicine. No solution. That was Victorian life. Pain was private. Suffering was silent. And dental care was a distant dream. But for now, you're safe. Your teeth are clean. And this story is finished. How the streets were cleaned, or weren't horses, mud, and manure. Asterisk. Tone. Calm, descriptive, and immersive. Ideal for drifting off peacefully. It's evening now. The candle flickers low on the bedside table. Outside your small, frosted window, you hear distant wheels clattering over cobblestones. A faint neigh, a splash, a cough. This was the Victorian city, and tonight, we walk through its filthiest secret. Let us slowly stroll through the streets of 19th century London, where hygiene was mostly an illusion. During the 1800s, the streets weren't just dirty, they were alive with filth. Picture this. Thousands of horses asterisk pulling carriages, wagons, and carts, each one dropping up to 35 pounds of manure a day. Rain mixing with dirt, horse dung, rotting food, human waste, and industrial soot to form a dark sludge known as asterisk city mud asterisk. The stench? Unforgettable. A choking mix of ammonia, rotting flesh, and smoke. Most streets had no drainage, no garbage pickup, and certainly no organized sanitation, at least not early on. Street sweepers asterisk, often children or poor men, worked by hand, with brooms, shovels, baskets, some wore no shoes. They were known as asterisk mudlarks asterisk, or street boys. Others, called crossing sweepers, earned pennies clearing walkways for the wealthy. They didn't just sweep. They scooped, dragged, pushed, and breathed it all in. And yet, they couldn't keep up. By 1894, London was drowning in dung. Historians estimate 50,000 horses moved through the city daily. That meant thousands of tons of waste every month, on streets, in gutters, in drinking water. In dry weather, the manure dried into dust and blew into eyes, mouths, and food. In wet weather, it became rivers of brown. In winter, the problem worsened. Snow mixed with muck, freezing into gray, greasy ice. People slipped constantly. Some died from falls. Others fell into cesspools, open pits where human waste was dumped. Few streets had paving stones. Most were dirt or gravel. A simple walk to the bakery meant muddy boots, stained skirts, and foul-smelling hems. Now imagine nighttime. No streetlights. Just gas lamps. Dim, flickering. Fog rolled in from the Thames, mixing with smoke and waste. Visibility, nearly zero. People carried handkerchiefs to their noses, not because of colds, but because the air itself was rotten. The wealthy had boots. The poor went barefoot. Everyone shared the same roads. In some neighborhoods, the filth reached ankle height. Some described it as walking through porridge. Rats thrived. So did fleas. And cholera. Yet no one questioned it. This was just life. Children played near manure heaps. Dogs rolled in refuse. Pigs scavenged near butcher shops. And always, that ever-present smell. Even when the city tried to clean up, it barely helped. The government introduced dust yards for rubbish, but many ignored them. Public toilets? Rare. People relieved themselves in alleyways. And the famous night soil men. Well, that's a story for another night. For now, imagine yourself slowly walking home in Victorian boots. Each step squishes. The air is damp. The lantern is low. You reach your door. Close it behind you. And suddenly, The silence feels clean. Bathing once a week, if that water, tubs, and taboo. Asterisk. The candles nearly burned to its end. Outside, the last coach has rattled by. Inside your room, the air hangs still. And now, we drift into one of the most intimate, yet forgotten rituals of the 19th century. Bathing. Or rather, the absence of it. Asterisk. Let us step quietly into a Victorian washroom, or what passed for one. In most homes, there was no bathroom, no running water, no taps, no tiled floors, and certainly no hot shower in the morning. Instead, a family shared a tin basin, usually placed by the fire. Water was fetched by hand, from a pump, a well, or even the river, then heated in a kettle over the hearth. That water was precious and reused. The typical full bath was a once-a-week event, if at all. For the poor, maybe once a month, often on Sundays. Hence the name, asterisk, the Sunday Washington. Asterisk. A wooden tub would be filled. The eldest bathed first, then the next, then the next. By the end, the water was brown, cloudy, and cold, and the youngest child still had to climb in. Soap? It existed, harsh, made with lye. It burned. It stung. And it was expensive. Even for the middle class, bathing was not daily. Instead, they washed faces and hands at a small basin each morning. Armpits, maybe. Feet, if they hurt. It was called a strip wash, and it was done with rags or cloths. Quietly, quickly, often in cold water. The wealthy had tubs, large, freestanding, made of copper or porcelain. But even then, bathing too often was discouraged. It was believed that too much water weakened the body. Doctors warned against soaking. They thought it opened the pores and invited disease. In fact, Victorians feared water, especially cold water. Many believed bathing could cause death if done improperly. One medical journal warned that washing the head with cold water could derange the intellect. Women were told not to bathe during menstruation, lest they become infertile. Children were sometimes scrubbed with vinegar or whiskey instead of water, for health. And then, there were public bathhouses. Dark, damp, crowded, often unsafe. Poor families might pay a penny for a stall, soap extra. But it was shameful. Going to the bathhouse was seen as proof you had no facilities of your own. So, many didn't go at all. Instead, they powdered themselves, perfumed their clothing, combed ash through their hair, to look clean without being clean. Hair was rarely washed. Once a month, maybe. Some used egg yolk, beer, or urine as a rinse. Lice were common, as were knit combs and kerosene treatments. Hats were shared. And the smell? Unspoken. Victorian hygiene wasn't just poor, it was deeply cultural. Cleanliness was about appearance, not body. As you lay still tonight, imagine a quiet Victorian room. A girl heating water in a dented kettle. A mother wringing out a cloth. A boy drying his feet by the hearth. And in the corner, a tin basin cooling by the window. Bath night is over, and sleep comes soon. The privy problem, toilets, chamber pots, and the sound behind the curtain star. The candle dims. The clock ticks softly in the hallway. Another page turns in this forgotten book of Victorian life. And now, we visit a subject rarely whispered aloud. The toilet. Or rather, the lack of one. Asterisk. In the 1800s, even among polite company, people didn't say toilet. They called it the privy, the necessary, or simply, the convenience. Yet for most, it was anything but convenient. Let's step outside, into the cold air, behind the house. There, usually at the end of a narrow garden path or alley, stood a wooden outhouse, called a privy. No plumbing, just a wooden bench with a hole. Below a pit. Dark, silent, often full. And if it rained, or froze, or snowed, well, nature didn't care. In cities, multiple families shared one. In slums, perhaps a dozen people to a single seat. No toilet paper, either. They used old newspapers, rags, hay, or nothing. In richer homes, there were chamber pots. Simple ceramic bowls, sometimes decorated ironically. Placed under beds or behind curtains. At night, you'd squat in the dark. Carefully, quietly. Then slide the pot back beneath the bed and hope it didn't spill. Emptying it. That was usually the maid's job. At dawn, she'd carry it to the backyard and dump it into a cesspit, a slop bucket, or the street gutter. The air? Thick. The smell? Daily. And then came the night soil men. They worked before sunrise. In silence. In shadows. With long ladles and wooden carts. They scooped human waste from backyard pits and hauled it away. It was a job of necessity. A job nobody thanked them for. And yet, one the whole city depended on. If they missed a day, the streets knew it. Early sewers existed, but they were crude. Some drained straight into rivers like the Thames. And yes, that was the same river used for drinking water. The same water people bathed in, washed clothes in, cooked with. That led to cholera, typhoid, dysentery. Illness swept through entire neighborhoods. But still, no one spoke of the source. Because to talk about the privy was vulgar. Flush toilets did exist, but only for the elite. Invented in the 1700s, improved in the 1800s, but frowned upon by landlords and neighbors. Why? Because the pipes flushed into the same cesspits and often overflowed. When the smell reached Parliament in 1858, it was named the Great Stink. Only then did things begin to change. But for most Victorians, even by 1890, the routine was the same. Hold your nose, watch your step, and don't ask what's behind the curtain. Now, as your eyes grow heavy, imagine a small candle flickering near a chamber pot. A door creaks at the back of the garden. A night soil man pushes his cart down a misty lane. The streets are quiet, but never truly clean. Dirty hands and finger bowls. Dining when germs weren't understood. The table is set. A fire flickers. China plates clink softly as they're arranged by careful hands. A silver fork. A cloth napkin. A bowl of water. This, dear listener, is the dining table of the Victorian era, and it tells a story of invisible things yet to be discovered. This is the age before germs had names. Doctors still debated whether disease came from miasma, bad air, or a divine curse. But one thing most people didn't do? Wash their hands. Imagine, a guest walks in from the London street, boots dusty from manure-covered cobblestones. He removes his gloves, shakes hands, sits, and begins to eat. With fingers. Utensils were used by the upper class, yes, but even they often used hands for bread, fruit, and meat. And hands had touched everything. Doors, coins, horses, even chamber pots. Yet washing with soap was rare. Instead, the wealthy offered finger bowls, dainty basins filled with warm, scented water and lemon slices. They weren't for scrubbing, just a symbolic dip, a swirl, a pat dry, and then back to carving the roast. At working-class tables, soap wasn't spared for mealtime. A rag might do. A quick splash from a shared basin, perhaps. But even if hands were rinsed, what about the food itself? Vegetables weren't washed thoroughly. Milk came unpasteurized. Meat was sometimes served days after slaughter, hung in the open, exposed to flies. Bakers brushed flour from their arms, but rarely cleaned the wooden tables. And no one thought to question it. Because illness didn't come from germs, they believed. It came from bad smells. Sanitary science was still a murky field. A few whispered of invisible agents, but they were often ignored. The idea that a dirty fingernail could cause death? Absurd. So people dined in elegance and filth. Crystal glasses filled with port wine beside a roast handled with unwashed hands. Everything looked beautiful and smelled of perfume, but beneath it all, danger lurked. One doctor, Ignaz Semmelweis, tried to prove hand-washing saved lives. He showed that when midwives scrubbed with chlorinated water, fewer women died. But his peers laughed. Doctors couldn't be unclean, they insisted. They were gentlemen. Semmelweis died in obscurity. It took decades before his ideas were accepted. So tonight, as you imagine a long table set beneath a chandelier, think of the lace gloves, the polished cutlery, and the hands. Hands that touched everything and washed almost nothing. And as your breathing slows, picture a finger bowl gently steaming with lemon water. A useless gesture in a world that hadn't yet seen the truth. Sleep now. The meal is done. The plates are cleared. And the world of unseen dangers waits, silently, to be discovered. The soap makers and their dirty secrets star. The warm flicker of a candlelight glows in the corner of a cramped workshop. Copper pots bubble with thick, cloudy liquid. The air is heavy with the sharp scent of fat and ash. Welcome to the world of Victorian soap making. You might imagine sweet lavender bars, perfumed and wrapped in lace. But the truth, dear listener, was far less elegant and far more secretive. Soap was not glamorous. It was labor. It was animal fat, boiled with lye, a harsh, caustic substance made from wood ash or soda. It burned hands, stung eyes, and smoked the air with a smell both greasy and sour. But soap was gold in the age of dirt, and those who made it guarded their recipes fiercely. A soap maker was part chemist, part butcher, part blacksmith. The fat, known as tallow, came from pigs, sheep, or cows. It was gathered from butchers or slaughterhouses, stored in barrels that stank in the summer heat. Imagine scraping thick layers of hardened grease from slaughter scraps, then melting it down until it shimmered. Into this hot mixture, lye, salt, and water, stirred slowly, cooled in molds, cut into slabs. A long process, often hidden behind closed doors. Why so secret? Because soap makers competed bitterly. Each claimed their product was gentler, purer, more fragrant. But many cut corners. Some used spoiled fat, others skipped curing. Some added chalk, clay, or powdered bone to bulk it out. And still others added cheap perfume to disguise rot. It looked clean, but was it? Worse, many made industrial soap in the same vats as laundry soap and animal glue. The same tools, the same unwashed buckets, the same boiling pots. Cross-contamination wasn't even a concept. And yet it sold. For most Victorians, soap was a luxury, not a daily essential. Working-class families stretched one bar for a month, using it for dishes, laundry, and skin. The harshness peeled fingers raw. Still, they were told, cleanliness was godliness. So they scrubbed, and the soap makers profited. By the late 1800s, companies like Pears and Lever Brothers began to industrialize cleanliness. They packaged hygiene as elegance. They hired artists to paint glowing skin and smiling children. Their soaps were perfumed with lilac, bergamot, and almond. But behind every box was still tallow, still lye, still sweat. And for all the pride in soap, most Victorians didn't understand how it worked. They didn't know about germs. They thought dirt carried bad air. So they washed what they could see, but not always what mattered. And sometimes, the soap itself, if poorly made, did more harm than good. So as you lie quietly now, think of a small shop in the foggy streets of 1865. A man stirs a steaming vat. A woman pours thick liquid into wooden molds. Their hands are burned, their lungs filled with fumes. But by morning, the soap will be cooled, cut, stamped, sold. It will smell like flowers. But it came from fire, fat, and secrecy. Rest easy now. The soap has cooled. The workshop is silent. And the truth of hygiene still lingers in the shadows. The water supply that made things worse asterisk. Imagine a narrow cobblestone street. The fog hangs low. Horses clop past open drains. Children carry pails. Adults line up. They all wait for water. Not from taps. Not from fountains. But from a public pump. The only water source for many in Victorian London. And this was where things truly went wrong. Water, the essence of life, became, in the 1800s, the silent carrier of death. You see, in much of Victorian Britain, clean water was a myth. Instead of a modern plumbing system, most homes had none. No pipes, no filtration, just shared wells, street pumps, or water carts that came once a day. These pumps drew from underground reservoirs, often dug near cesspits or graveyards. Imagine that. A pump pulling water from the same ground where sewage and rotting corpses leaked into the soil. The result? Water that looked clean, but carried invisible killers. In the 1850s, a single pump on Broad Street in London became infamous. A terrible outbreak of cholera, hundreds dead in days. No one knew why, until Dr. John Snow, a physician ahead of his time, made a map. He traced every case of illness. They all led back to the Broad Street pump. He removed the pump handle. The outbreak slowed, and the world slowly began to realize water could carry disease. But before that discovery, people didn't believe in germs. They blamed bad air, miasma. So they burned incense. They opened windows. They didn't boil water. They didn't question pumps. And they drank what they were given. Wealthier homes had rain barrels or servants to boil water. But even then, the risk remained. Cisterns on rooftops grew algae. Lead pipes leached poison, and water carts filled their barrels from questionable sources. Even the mighty River Thames, wide and iconic, had become an open sewer. People bathed in it, washed clothes, drank from it, and died. Yet, for most Victorians, water meant more than drinking. It was for laundry, done rarely, and often in the same tubs used for bathing. It was for cooking, scrubbing floors, and occasionally for cleaning wounds. But because water was so hard to get, people used it sparingly. Baths were rare. Boiling was avoided. It took too much coal. And children often drank from the same dirty bucket used by the entire family. So the irony of the era? In a time obsessed with appearance and moral purity, the thing most dangerous to health was invisible, tasteless, and right in every home. Water, the illusion of purity. And when someone got sick, it was blamed on fate, sin, or the weather. Not the well, not the water. So the cycle continued. Now, as you drift deeper into sleep, imagine a candlelit street. A boy walks quietly with a tin bucket. He stops at a public pump, fills it, and carries it back to his tenement. That water will be used for soup, for laundry, for drinking. And in it, a million unseen dangers. But to them, it was just water. Sleep well now. The streets are quiet. The pump is still. And the water, silent, mysterious, waits for the morning. The dirty truth behind Victorian Laundry Day star. The day begins not with a sunrise, but with a thick gray mist pressing against tiny cracked windows. A woman wakes before the rest of the house. She wraps her shawl tightly, stokes the fire, and sets out one simple goal. Laundry, asterisk. But in the Victorian era, Laundry Day wasn't just a chore. It was a battle. No washing machines, no hot tap, no electricity, only boiling water, stiff brushes, aching backs, and long, cold hours. Clothes were washed rarely, perhaps once every 2 weeks, or even once a month. Why? Because laundry was exhausting, messy, expensive, and frankly, brutal. The process began with hauling water, heavy buckets from a well or pump. Then came the heating, coal or wood stoked in a blackened hearth, water warmed in great iron pots. A woman, or more often a servant, would soak the garments overnight in lye or ash soap. The next morning, she'd wring them by hand, bend over a washtub, and scrub them raw with a brush. All this without gloves, hands red and cracked from the cold, steam filling the air, back bent over for hours. And this was just the washing. Next came rinsing, once, twice, maybe more, depending on how much soap lingered. But soap in those days, it wasn't gentle. It was caustic, often made with animal fat and lye. Then came the wringing, twisted tightly to force out moisture. No machines, just muscle and patience. Afterward, drying. Drying in a damp climate was tricky. There were no tumble dryers. So clothing hung in shared courtyards, on ropes between windows, or on indoor racks near the fire. In tenements, clothes were strung above beds or stairwells, dripping onto anyone below. In larger houses, laundresses hung garments on hedges, fences, and even tombstones in nearby churchyards. Imagine walking through a cemetery and seeing trousers dancing in the wind beside gravestones. And then there was ironing, but not electric irons, heavy cast iron slabs, heated on coals, tested with spit to avoid scorching. One wrong press, and a shirt was ruined. Laundry day could last from sunrise to sunset, and if rain came, the whole effort started again tomorrow. But beyond the physical effort was the emotional weight. Clean linen was a symbol, a marker of respectability. Dirty collars meant sloth. So mothers scrubbed with pride, fearing judgment. Even the poorest tried to maintain dignity with clean sleeves, even if the rest of the garment hadn't seen soap in months. And yet, despite all the work, most people owned very few clothes. A working man might have 2 shirts. A child, 1 full set. A woman, 2 dresses, 1 for weekdays, 1 for Sunday. So laundry wasn't just about cleanliness. It was about survival. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, picture this. A small room, steam rising, a fire crackling low. A woman gently wrings a cloth, places it on a line by the window. She exhales, her breath forming a cloud in the cold air. Her fingers are red. Her back aches. But the job is done. Laundry day, a forgotten war of will and warmth. And now, You rest, far from the scrubbing, the boiling, the wringing. In silence, in calm, in clean sheets. Soap, or something like it. What they really use to get clean star. Tone, slow, immersive, and sleep-inducing. Before brands, before bars wrapped in paper, before liquid body wash in shiny bottles. There was something else. Something sharper, rougher, stranger. Victorian soap wasn't always soap. To start, we must forget what we know. Back then, soap was rarely floral. It didn't lather softly. It didn't leave skin silky smooth. In fact, many Victorians were afraid of soap. The most common cleaning agents? Lye, tallow, ashes, clay, and urine, asterisk. Yes, urine. Let's begin with lye soap. Lye is a caustic alkali, burning and powerful, made by pouring water through ashes, then boiling it with animal fat. It could burn the skin, blind the eyes, corrode fabric. But for centuries, this was the base of homemade soap. In rural villages, women would make it in batches, once or twice a year. They'd store it in large, sticky lumps. It smelled like death, but it worked. Sort of. Tallow soap asterisk, made from animal fat, had its own problems. It was greasy, heavy. It often spoiled in warm weather and attracted flies. But it was cheap and better than nothing. For the poor, they used nothing at all. Or, they turned to ashes, sand, or scraping with rough cloth. In cities, public bathhouses offered access to simple soap cakes. But they were shared, overused, sometimes stolen. And in places like prisons and workhouses, soap was rationed like gold. Some cleaned with vinegar. Some with alum or clay, believing it drew out toxins. Others thought washing with water too often was unhealthy. Especially warm water. It was believed to weaken the body. And then, there was urine. Yes, aged urine, called lant, was used to clean clothes, whiten teeth, and soften leather. Its ammonia content made it effective, if stomach-turning. It was even collected by barbers, tanners, and fullers. To walk down a Victorian alley might mean stepping over slop buckets of recycled, cleaning liquid. The rich had choices. Imported scented soaps from France. Soaps shaped like seashells or swans. Lavender, rose, and lemon oils. But they were luxuries, often displayed, rarely used. Cleanliness was a symbol, not a practice. And so, you might have found yourself at a sink, with a cracked bar of yellow-brown soap, smelling of mutton and ash, scrubbing until the skin went raw, but still feeling dirty. Because in Victorian times, clean was an illusion. A hope, a habit only slowly beginning to form. Now let your thoughts drift, not to harsh soap, not to boiling vats of lye, but to still water, cool cloth, and a quiet room. Tonight, there are no rough hands, no sour smells, just soft silence and rest. Bathing, barely. How often did they actually wash? Asterisk. Tone, gentle, slow, meditative, perfect for drifting to sleep. Close your eyes. Imagine a tub, not porcelain, not warm, but made of tin, cold to the touch, sitting in the center of a kitchen near a fireplace, or perhaps in the backyard under fading evening light. That was the bath, and it didn't happen every day or every week. In the Victorian era, bathing was rare. Some washed once a week, some once a month, and the poorest? Maybe once a season, asterisk, or not at all. Water was heavy. Heating it took hours. There were no pipes in many homes. No indoor plumbing, just buckets and basins. For the working class, bath time wasn't private or peaceful. It was a public family ritual. A tub was placed in the middle of the room. Water was heated on the stove. One by one, family members bathed, asterisk in the same water star. The father might go first, the youngest child last. By then, the water was cloudy, cold, and smelled of sweat. Soap, if they had it, stung the skin. Cloth was used to scrub. Hair, sometimes rinsed with vinegar, beer, or plain water, depending on what they could afford. Many believed that bathing too often made you sick. Doctors warned against it. The pores, they said, might open too wide, and disease could enter. Cold air asterisk was feared. Dampness was dangerous. So, washing became a targeted task. Hands, face, underarms asterisk, that was enough. Some turned to sponge baths. A wet rag, a basin, a towel warmed by the fire. Quick, efficient. Still, better than nothing. The upper class had more options: marble tubs, bathing servants, rooms just for washing. But even then, many didn't bathe often. Perfume and powder did the work. The illusion of freshness. Even Queen Victoria herself was bathed by hand. It was not a daily event. It was occasional, ceremonial, controlled. And when illness struck, people didn't rush to wash. They often feared water, thought it might shock the system. Better, they believed, to rest, to wrap up, to avoid getting wet. So when the day ended, you might lie in bed, unclean, unscented, but safe in your beliefs. That warmth mattered more than water. That too much washing was a risk, and that dirt could be managed. For now, let your mind drift there, to a quiet, candlelit cottage. No running water, just flickers of flame, and a bowl of water, waiting for morning. Sleep now. You are not dirty. You are simply resting. In the past, where baths were rare, but stories never were. The scent of the streets, how the city smelled every day asterisk. Tone. Calm, slow, sleep-inducing, gentle narration for nighttime relaxation. Close your eyes. Now take a breath. Imagine that breath not of fresh air, but of soot, horse manure, rotting vegetables, and coal smoke. This was the scent of a Victorian city. Not for moments, not occasionally, but every single day. The streets of London, Manchester, Edinburgh were alive, yes, but not in the way you might hope. They breathed. They sweated. They stank. The air itself was dense, heavy, stale. It clung to skin. It settled on clothes. It lingered in homes. Imagine a narrow cobblestone street, lined with row houses, tall and crooked. Windows rarely opened. When they did, they faced soot-blackened walls. From above, chimneys spewed smoke. Below, chamber pots were emptied. That's right, human waste, thrown into the street. People shouted warnings before dumping. Asterisk Gardaloo, asterisk. But often too late. Urine, feces, rot, mixed with mud, horse dung, and spilled beer. This was the Victorian cocktail of city life. Add in the smell of animals. Dogs, pigs, chickens, even cows. Kept in yards or back alleys. Mixed with butcher's scraps, left to rot. Fish heads asterisk, blood, and guts dumped by gutters. Now stir in smoke from coal fires, burning almost constantly. And you get a sky that was not blue, but a permanent gray. The air was not clean. It was felt, almost tasted. Doctors called it asterisk miasma asterisk, bad air that carried disease. They believed smell was the cause of illness. And so, to fight disease, they tried to fight smell. Lavender posies, vinegar-soaked handkerchiefs, scented pomanders worn around the neck. They didn't remove the stench. They simply masked it. Even hospitals and workhouses reeked. Lack of plumbing, crowded quarters, poor ventilation. And yet, people adapted. Children played in the gutters. Women scrubbed steps each morning, knowing by evening the filth would return. But when rain came, oh, when it came, it didn't clean. It churned the street muck into slippery sludge, a dark stew of everything. And when it dried, the smell returned, stronger, thicker, a reminder, this was home. So as you drift to sleep, imagine the slow clop of a carriage over wet stones, the hiss of a lamplighter's torch, and the scent of another time. Harsh, yet real. Sleep now. The streets are quiet. The smells, long faded. And all that remains is the story. Cleaning clothes without water. Victorian laundry secrets asterisk. Tone. Gentle, slow, sleep-friendly narration. Close your eyes. Picture a world where cleaning clothes wasn't simple. There were no washing machines, no running water, no warm sudsy baths for your linens. Only hard labor and patience. In Victorian times, the act of doing laundry was less about cleaning and more about survival. Most homes had no plumbing, no hot water on tap, no soap in the modern sense. Water had to be carried from wells, pumps, or rivers. Heavy buckets, frozen hands in winter, slippery walks back home, and still, not enough. For many, laundry day meant 1. Heating water over an open fire. 2. Stirring clothes in large boiling pots. 3. Scrubbing each piece by hand on wooden boards. 4. Rinsing repeatedly, often in the same dirty water. Soap, a rough bar, handmade from animal fat and lye. Harsh, burned skin, Faded fabric. Fragrance? None, except the faint smell of ash and wet wool. But for the poor, even that was too much. So what did they do? They beat clothes against rocks. They laid them in streams, hoping flowing water would do the work. Some simply hung clothes to air out, believing sun and wind might cleanse what water could not. A common technique: dry cleaning with fuller's earth or chalk powder, rubbed into fabric, brushed off hours later. The stains stayed. But the grease? Sometimes it faded. Underwear? Rarely washed, too delicate, or simply not owned in multiples. Shirts and chemises, worn until stiff with sweat. Laundresses? They worked for the upper classes. Bent over tubs, hands raw, paid little, respected even less. They were invisible cleaners, women who bore the dirt of others, without thanks or relief. Clothes were precious. Most had only one or two outfits. Washing them too often risked ruin. Fabric frayed, seams gave way. So instead of cleaning often, people wore layers, covering dirt asterisk with cleaner garments. Aprons, shawls, coats. Out of sight, men out of mind. And drying? Hung in yards, or by the fire. Steam-filled rooms. The smell of wet fabric mixed with coal smoke and stew. It was slow, exhausting, endless. But for Victorians, this was normal, a rhythm of life. So as you lay here, listening, feel the softness of your sheets, the ease of clean clothes, the warmth of a machine you didn't lift a finger to use. Then imagine a cold floor, boiling pots, a stiff brush in your hand, and breathe deeply, for your laundry day is over. Sleep well. Soap, or the lack thereof. Why most people didn't bathe asterisk. Tone, calm, sleepy narration, perfect for drifting off. Close your eyes. Let the world soften around you. Now, imagine living in a time where soap was rare and bathing was optional. In the Victorian era, bathing was not daily, not even weekly for most. It was an event, planned, prepared, delayed, if the weather was cold, or if the water was scarce, or if time was short, which it always was. Soap, as we know it, creamy, scented, gentle, didn't exist asterisk for the average person. The rich might have had lavender bars, or French milled varieties. But the poor? They had lye soap, made from wood ash and animal fat. It stung. It burned. It stripped everything. Even the color from your clothes, or the skin from your hands. Many chose not to use it. And who could blame them? Bathing itself was a chore. Water had to be heated in a kettle, then poured into a tin tub. The same tub used by your siblings, your parents, in the same water star. The first person was lucky. The last, not so much. And so, people avoided it. Covered smells with powder, sweat with layers, hair grease with hats and bonnets. Instead of full baths, Victorians often did dry washes. A cloth, a little vinegar or rose water, a wipe of the hands, the face, maybe the neck. Done. Hair, washed even less. Water made it frizz. So they used bristle brushes, oils asterisk, and sometimes just let it be. And yet, Victorians didn't think of themselves as dirty.